Hi, we are the Stronghold System and welcome to the next video of Power to the Plurals. We are the founders of the Plural Association, the first grassroots peer-led registered nonprofit for the 3.7% of people living with dissociative identity disorder and all other forms of multiplicity under the Plural umbrella. Thank you for investing the time into your system and for watching this video. Today we'll be talking about culture mentioned in the DSM5 and 4 in regards to dissociative identity disorder and OSDD. I have a lot of notes today, so if you see me looking at my phone, that's where my notes are. If you see me looking at the screen instead of the camera, that is where my text are that I'm reading, and I will also put that on the screen so you can read along. Okay, let's get started. So I first want to make some bases before we dive into the deeper culture aspect. And that is by starting by the development and course of dissociative identity disorder mentioned in the DSM-5. So I'll put that on the screen so you can read along. Right in the first sentence where it says development of course, it says dissociative identity disorder is associated with overwhelming experiences, traumatic events, and or abuse occurring in childhood. So let's look closer at that sentence. The first thing it says is that DID is associated with. It doesn't say it's caused by, because if it would say that, that would mean that everyone who has traumatic experiences in childhood ends up with dissociative identity disorder, and this is not the case. The second part is because it would require proof of the traumatic event in order to get diagnosed, which would be highly unethical and for most people impossible. Hence, it doesn't say DID is caused by traumatic events. It says DID is associated with. They also can't prove it. They can't study this ethically because it would require traumatizing children. The second thing in this sentence that I want to point out is that it talks about overwhelming experiences. And this is the first thing it mentions, right? I've talked about this before. For me, I read the DSM like I read a cookbook. And in a cookbook, what you need most, they put it on top. So if you need a lot of sugar, sugar is on top. And if you need a little bit of water, it's like the last thing on the list. I read the DSM in the same way. I don't know if I should. If someone knows, please let me know, but that's how I read it. So the first thing it says is overwhelming experiences. Then it says traumatic events. And then it says and or abuse occurring in childhood. So to me, it's really important that we talk about these overwhelming experiences. And what is important to realize is that trauma is not so much about what happened, but more about how your brain responded, the chemicals in your brain responded to that overwhelming experience, which made it that you could not, what they call integrate that experience, process that experience is another word that is used for that. So it's not so much about what happened, but more about how your brain responded to the overwhelming experience. And you know, everyone in life has overwhelming experiences, right? Like who doesn't? So trauma gatekeeping is an issue, if only because the DSM says overwhelming experiences. And my last point on this piece of this video is that only you get to decide if something was traumatic for you or not. Like no one else gets to decide that. Maybe a therapist can like look at the situation with you and discover if it was traumatic or not. But no one on the internet is going to decide for you if something was traumatic or not. And that goes both ways, right? We tweeted about this earlier this week, about the first half of this video, and we said, so he who is without overwhelming experiences cast the first stone. It's a joke, don't throw stones. As you know, it is said that dissociative identity disorder is extremely rare. Is it? I don't think so. As you can see in the same image on the screen, the DSM-5 says that the prevalence for DID is 1.5%. If we look at the research from April 2019, there were 31,000 college students and 3.7% of them scored for DID. That is a lot more than people with red hair, a lot more than schizophrenia, a lot more than bipolar disorder. It's not rare, but we're still being told it is rare. Personally, I had a specialist in dissociative identity disorder tell me that there are only 80 people in the Netherlands who have this disorder. But Liberty of the Sorority made these fantastic images, and as you can see, the world prevalence of dissociative identity disorder in the Netherlands is 170,000 people at 1%, and 512,000 at 3%. And I also have these stats for America because I assume you're more interested in that than our tiny country. USA population, let's see, 1% is 3.2 million people, and 3% would be 9.8 million. And they actually made a new video with updated statistics for the year 2020, I guess. And you can find that in the keynote session for the Plural Positivity World Conference 2020, and we will talk a little bit more about that later in this video as well. But I just wanted to include that here, that definitely it's not 80 people in the Netherlands, it's a lot more. And it's not rare. Okay, so now that we've covered the basics about the development and course of DID, let's look at the culture aspect that the DSM is talking about. Let's go to the DSM4. Here it is. I will put it on the screen. And let's read what it says about the cultural experiences on plurality. A cross-cultural perspective is particularly important in the evaluation of dissociative disorders because dissociative states are a common and accepted expression of cultural activities or religious experience in many societies. So I really please take notice of this, that it is a common and accepted expression of cultural activities or religious experiences in many societies around the world to have this plural experience. I will point out it says dissociative states, and it's not specified what that means. It is not specified in this explanation here in the DSM-4 for, by the way, OSDD, not DID, it's not explained. But we'll get there in the DSM-5. So it can mean many things, right? Dissociative states, and maybe it's vague on purpose. Maybe it's hard to define. Maybe they can define it because it would be so broad, because there are so many vast cultures and religious practices. Actually, I don't like the word religious experiences at all because it again implies possession, and there are many more forms of spiritual practices where people have plural experiences rather than religious experiences, which for me, religion is the 5 major religions in the world, and those most often talk about spirit possession, not so much spiritual experiences. And possession to me indicates a negative experience, which definitely doesn't have to be the case. And let's look at the DSM-5 and what happened there. So here is the culture-related diagnostic issues in the DSM-5 on DID. So just to be extra clear, the last image was from OSDD and this is from DID. Okay, so just for ethic purposes, I just want to make this clear. Okay, this didn't feel right, so here's editing me. This is the DSM-5 in dissociative disorders. If we scroll down a little bit, this is the only place where we see the word culture in the dissociative disorder part. So now we're going to dissociative identity disorder, right? There it is. We're going to scroll down and find the culture part, which we've already showed you in an image earlier. There it is. And then we're going to scroll down to Other Specified Dissociative Disorder, OSDD, right? Which we showed the DSM-4 image from. So it's a little bit further down. And here it is. This is all there is for OSDD. As you can see, there is no part on culture. It's completely erased. Completely. So if we look at this text, I don't want to read the whole thing, but basically what it does is it explains how to differentiate between DID and the cultural or religious experience. And it talks a lot about possession. It also talks about forms of possessing spirits, deities, demons, animals, or mythical figures. I'm again not sure why they're using the word possession, maybe because it is written in the Western society where possession is most common, and so they use that as a point of reference, but I don't think it's very ethical. Okay, that's my personal opinion. It doesn't matter, really, in this video. So what happened, yes, if we look clearly at this, first, we were common and accepted practices around the many cultures and religious practices in the world. And now in the DSM-5, all it does is explain how to differentiate between those two or 3 experiences, which, you know, it's super valid. It's important that a therapist can make the differentiation. Very much depends on their cultural competence, obviously. And even then, a therapist will, I think, most often think about the pathological ways of things and how psychology views things rather than how a spiritual viewpoint holds up. So basically, we got erased, right? Like the cultural and religious or spiritual experiences of plurality being common and valid and accepted in many cultures around the world was just completely erased from the DSM and whitewashed. And I used that word. Okay, so I took a break there because I didn't know if I could use the word whitewash, but I think I can because it only talks about possession, right? And I don't think that's accurate or fair at all. So, okay, so if you want to learn more about why or how this may have happened, that plurality got erased in this way in the DSM-5, I highly recommend you watch the video by the Sorority System, who was the keynote speaker for the Plural Positivity World Conference 2020, which is a free conference for anyone, many, on YouTube. And you find that at youtube.com/plural events or through the pluralevents.org website. It's free. You can watch it back. It's a great keynote session. All the videos look extremely long, but that's because there is a chat at the end that happened live, so no worries. It's a conference session, so it's a bit longer than a YouTube video, but it's great information, very insightful. I learned so much. It was hard to watch, you know, it was offensive. I got like hurt and like I kept thinking about what all these doctors must think about us, but it was really good to have that insight and that knowledge, and I'm very grateful they made that video. So I hope this video by us on the cultural related diagnostic issues in the DSM-4 and 5, it really stood out to me, and why we find this DSM-4 on OSDD, because maybe you're like, why are you not on the DID section? I looked at the OSDD section because I was looking into DDNOS, which was, you know, the old name for OSDD. It's not exactly the same disorder either. It was like the diagnostic criteria were changed. But anyway, I was looking at OSDD. That's why I found the image. Someone sent me pictures of the DSM-4 on OSDD, and I read there that it said plurality, the experience of it, is a common and accepted practice around the world. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Especially like if you compare it to the DSM-5. So I just wanted to like take a moment and really share that information with you, because I think there's so much discourse and discourse in our communities, you know, which we have been a big advocate of being inclusive, explicitly inclusive of all forms of plurality. Even though we are a diagnosed DID system, you know, we find it very important to be explicitly inclusive of all forms of plurality. Because, you know, I can judge other people and my own experiences don't really match with the DID description in the DSM-5. For example, I think we're all different individual beings, entities, people in this body, not so much that we make up one person together. So, you know, my own experience don't always line up with DID, which is why we also self-identify as plural. I really feel like we're still not accepted within psychology, even though there was so much strive and so much happened positively in the acceptance of autism, for example, in the last, I don't know, 5-10 years. Mental health in general, suicide prevention, like so much has improved, but the idea is still, you know, in the media portrayed as dangerous people. And so I don't know, it's just important to me to also not erase plurality. Like, it's been around way longer than psychology has, so it's just weird to me to pathologize it like that. Anyway, soon we'll have an article coming out about OSDD. Highly recommend you check that out once it gets released on the powertotheplurals.com website. If you don't know, we have a new website, central website is what we're calling it, for all our works, because it got confusing for people, like what is the nonprofit actually doing and what services are there, what is going on. So we made a central website, the pluralassociation.com, and from there you can find the .org website, and you can also find the powertotheplurals.com website. and our groups and other services. And once the webinars go live, you can find the sign up link there. If you want to stay up to date about that and all other things, I highly recommend you sign up to our mail list. And you can find that link or the sign up form for that on the pluralassociation.com or any other website, basically, that we own, or on any other of our websites. Yeah, this was great. I think this video worked out, which is a miracle. If you don't know yet, we get very anxious these days on camera. We're not exactly sure why, but it's been very hard for us to record videos. And also we've been working very hard on the nonprofit. So that's why you don't see a lot of videos from us, but we're still here. We're still active. We're still doing a lot of things, just not so much on YouTube while we are working on bigger projects. But this video was super important to me, and I found a moment to be able to record. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for investing the time into your system, and we wish you all the best. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.